Now I'm going to take you through some basic things in Python, but before we get started you need to have Python installed on your computer. Now if you do a basic search for Python download, you can find python.org webpage, which is the official webpage, and you can download the latest version of Python from there for either a Windows computer or for an Apple computer. And once you've downloaded it, you can install a program and it will ask you about installing idle. Now that's fine, idle is the editor that you use to write your programs in. Now I've got my file just saved on my desktop at the moment, but if you was to double click on it, it would run the Python file, but if you right click and say edit with idle, it will open up in a text editor so that you can do your programming. Now, the first program that anybody writes whenever they're starting programming is a Hello World program. The idea behind this is you check to see if your system will work correctly. So that's the first program we're going to create now. Now I've typed in the command print hello world. Now print is a special word, so it comes up in purple, and hello world is the text that comes up in green. Now to run the program we can click on run and click on the menu there, but if you can see we can also select F5 if we prefer. So in the future I'm just going to press F5 on my keyboard. It asks you, do you wish to save? And we click on OK, because yes, we can save our program. And then as you can see, Hello World appears in the window to the right. If our program had some errors, such as we spelt print wrong, or we forgot our speech marks around Hello World, we would have had an error come up in red writing on the right hand side rather than our program functioning. But we'll worry about fixing errors at a later date. Now as we've got Hello World working, we know that our setup is going to function correctly because Hello World displayed in the right hand window as we wanted it to. So now we need to sort out about doing something a bit different with our program. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at getting things from the keyboard and displaying sensible things back on the screen again. So let's replace our Hello World with a sensible question. So we're going to say, what is your name? And then we're going to try and get something from the keyboard and process it. Now the command to get things from the keyboard is input. Now input will get something from the keyboard, but we need to store it somewhere. So what we're going to do is have a variable called name. A variable is just somewhere where we can store a word or a number or possibly even a picture or a sound file. But in this case it's going to be the name that people type in from the keyboard. So when we run a program it will say, what is your name? They will type in a name and it will be stored in the variable called name, and then we will reply with something sensible saying your name is, and then whatever they typed in, so whatever is stored in the name variable, just so we can see how things work. So now we've got our program written, what we're going to do is we're going to test it by pressing F5, click on OK to save. It comes up saying what is your name? I'm going to type in Bob and it says your name is Bob. So our program worked exactly as we wanted it to. It did display the person's name after asking the question. So our program is working as we would like it to work, using the variable name. Now so far we've got a name from the keyboard and we've stored it in the variable name. Now that is a string. A string is a set of either numbers and letters. But what if we just wanted a number? So let's ask another question. We're going to say, what is your age? We're going to get something from the keyboard and we'll store it in a variable called age, because that's a sensible variable name. Now age wants to be a number, so we do something called casting. Casting means converting from one type to another. So what we're going to do is we're going to put int in front of the word input and put the word input inside some brackets. And this will force what was input as a string into an integer to be stored as age as an integer, integer being a whole number. Once we have the age stored in a variable, it might be nice to also display it on our final print line, just so that we can check things are working. So I can add another little bit of text saying and your age is, and then I can just put the variable age. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to input a name, input an age, and it's just going to repeat those values back out to me again. That's my prediction. Let's see what happens. So We're going to run the program by pressing F5. We're going to click on OK to save. We're going to type in, we'll have Bob again, and we'll type in an age of 22. And it says, your name is Bob, and your age is 22. So it does perform exactly as we hoped it would. Now, there is another way of outputting text, which involves strings that you've got in green and variables. So let me just copy and paste that line and make a few changes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the commas with pluses. Now, plus is a way of sticking together strings. So your name is a string, and name is a string. So we stick them together using the plus. And also, and your age is a string, but the age at the end, that's actually an integer, if you remember, which is a number. So we need to make that back into a string if we want to use the pluses to glue them together. Now this isn't quite going to work the same as the line above. We are going to have to make another little change, but what we might do first is just run it just to see what happens. Again, it's asking name, we'll put in Bob again, and we'll put in 22. Now you can see this time that it has nearly done the same thing, but there's no spaces between the Bob and the 22. And that's because it is just gluing together the strings. The line above had commas, and the commas actually make it put a space in between the data. So your name is, and then a space before name, and your age is, and a space before age. But if we want to do it with the pluses, we have to put spaces in. The program should now produce two identical lines. So again, if we put in Bob and 22, you can see that it has given us exactly the same data. So it doesn't matter if you use a plus or if you use a comma. The thing about using a plus is you have to make sure that you manually put a space in, or with a comma, you don't have to worry, it will put the space in for you. And the other thing is that if you are using the pluses and you have an integer age, because the name is already going to be a string, but age is going to be an integer in this case, we have to convert it from an integer back into a string using that thing called casting, but this time str, or before we used int for int. So it's the same kind of idea, but it's just converting it back into a string so we can use it with the pluses. Now you might say, well, surely it's easier just to keep it as a string. Why would you ever want to make it into an integer? Well, if we want to do maths with a variable, we have to make sure it's an integer. Now what I've done now is I've just put a times 2. Now the times is the star above the 8. I'll just change my text so it makes more sense as well. But now my program should produce an answer that is twice the age. If I put in Bob and I put in 22, it doubles the age, so it says 44. We've done maths on that variable called age. So 22 was stored inside the variable, it is now displaying 44, twice that. Although our program's working, I'm actually just going to break our program for a little bit. So let's just get rid of the bottom line because they both do the same thing. Now what would happen if we didn't make age into an integer, if we just kept age as a string? So you type in age, it's kept as a string, and then we try and do maths on a string rather than maths on an integer. Let's see what happens. We run our program, we type in some data. Oh, hold on a minute, I'm just going to click down the bottom. We type in some data, so I'll type in Bob, and I'll type in 22, but now, rather than give us the answer 44, it has given us 2,222. What it's done is for twice age, it's printed out the string twice, 22 followed by 22. So maths doesn't work on a string because it just doubles the string. We wanted to actually mathematically double the number, so we do need to convert it into an integer so that we can do our calculations correctly. Okay, so I think that'll do for this video, but I'll create some more videos where we'll cover some other features in Python.